Many of us, we are reeling and streaming our lives away. It's not because God doesn't love us, he's not working in our lives. It's because we become preoccupied with all kinds of things. And what it's done is it's actually numbed our souls. It's numbed us away from the things that are most important. When it comes to knowing God and making him known, because we become preoccupied with other things, it's actually caused us to be misaligned. And I remember when I came to know God, I said, how are you any different than my earthly father? You exist, but where have you been? Have you not seen the struggles that me and my mom have gone through? Like, where have you been? And I remember having these conversations with him. I'll never forget, growing up, my mom told me that as a kid, she would put me in bed at night, and that as she put me in bed, she walked away. She would hear me doing something, so she'd be coming back to my bedroom to get onto me. And here's what she'd hear me doing as a kid. She would hear me role-playing. And one of the things I'd be role-playing is I would be pretending, for whatever reason, I thought as a kid that if you had your dad took you fishing. I just thought, now listen, you can have a great dad and you never go fishing in your life. But for whatever reason, I thought a dad takes you fishing. And so she would come back to my room and she would just listen, and she could hear me role-playing. I'd be like, okay, Dad, I've got my tackle box, I've got my fishing pole, I'm ready to go fishing. And she said she would just start weeping and she would leave my room. Now here I am, 20 years old, I give my heart and my life to Jesus Christ, and I'm reading scripture and it refers to God as my Father. In fact, Jesus says, when you pray, say our Father. And I remember I would say, it's so hard for me to call you Father. I don't understand where you've been, and I feel like even though I know I need you, I want to reject you all at the same time. And I remember having these honest conversations with God, and I'll never forget a spiritual mentor and father that God brought into my life. And I remember one day we're driving together, we're going somewhere, and I remember him saying, you know, Kendall, I was praying for the other day, and God told me the weirdest thing. And I said, well, what is it? And he says, and so he started to tell me, and he'd say, no, it's just too weird. I said, well, just tell me. And he'd start again, and he'd stop. He says, I don't know. I said, how about this? How about you tell me, and then we'll both decide if you're a weirdo or not. How about that? And he said, all right. He said, I don't know if this means anything to you, but God told me to take you fishing. You see, the reason why I share that story with you is that when scripture says, when Jesus says, I know all the things that you do, it's not in the sense of correction, it's the sense of I see you. It's the sense I love you. I care about you. I see every single detail of your life. And listen, some of you need to hear this because you've been walking with Jesus and maybe you feel like he's turned his back on you or that he doesn't see. Scripture says he's the God who sees. He loves you dearly. He cares about every single detail of your heart and of your life. He loves you. In fact, just as a reminder, when scripture says, I know all the things that you do, I'll share one verse of scripture, 1 Samuel 16:7. The Lord does not look at the thing man looks at. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. He sees past all this stuff that's going through, and he sees you, and he cares deeply about you. But then here's what happens as Jesus continues to affirm his people. He says this in verse 2, I have seen your hard work and your patient endurance. I know you don't tolerate evil people. You have examined the claims of those who say they are apostles but are not. You have discovered they are liars. You have patiently suffered for me without quitting. So Jesus Christ says, I know all the things that you do. He's affirming the church, how he's been there, how he sees them. And then he affirms that they're hard workers. In other words, he's saying, you guys have grit. You guys have hustle in you. He says you have patient endurance. That means you're not willing to give up. There's no quit in you. He even says that you don't tolerate evil or wicked people, which means that they're morally sharp. In fact, he makes reference to these group of people called the Nicolaitans. The Nicolaitans were a group of people who would actually blend the Christian faith with cultural practices. It would be like someone saying, I'm saved by grace and I can live however I want. And he says, listen, you have no part in that. You understand that there is truth. You understand that there is a real God and you live to serve him and to serve him alone. In fact, they would examine the claims of teachers. In other words, they had discernment in their body. They actually cared about the things of God. And he even says they're steadfast, which meant that they were unwavering. In other words, here's what we see. We see that there's a lot of things going right. They were disciplined, they were faithful, they were busy. This is a high capacity church. But then Jesus says something that is shocking, and he says this in verse 4. I want you to see this. He says, but I have this complaint against you. You don't love me or each other as you did at first. Now, scholars actually debate what this means, but essentially it could mean that yes, they had lost their love for him. They also had lost their love for each other, but also they believe it's directly connected that they had also lost their love for reaching the lost as well. And so in this moment, you see that the church is off by 1 degree. Now notice what Jesus did not say. He did not say that they had abandoned truth. He did not say that they stopped serving. He did not say that they quit on being on some sort of mission. In other words, but they were still off by 1 degree. In fact, I think it's a great reminder for us today, and it's a danger that all of us face in this room, and it's this, that you can actually look effective and be misaligned. You can still be off by 1 degree and be really busy for God and his kingdom. If anybody, how many of you are married in the house, all right? All right, how many of you are single? Now I want you to look around the room, there's someone here for you, all right? Anyway, but you understand that in marriage, all right, it is possible in time, it's possible for you to get caught up in activities and schedules and duties and responsibilities and your career and experience those pressures. And actually all of a sudden, someone that you made a covenant with before God and them, you said, I'm gonna love you for your whole entire life. All of a sudden they begin to become a roommate. And what you find is that activity actually replaced intimacy. And I would say this, no one wakes up and says, I want to drift from the Lord. I want to drift from my spouse. No one wakes up and says, I want to be misaligned from the mission of God. But I can say this, misalignment happens very easy in our lives. And I believe very simply they can happen because for some of us, we become preoccupied with other things. In fact, there actually may be good things in your life. You have studies, you have career pressures, you have your schedules, and it's caused you to become preoccupied with this life in which we're living. Jesus warns us of this when he says, be careful that the worries of life will actually lead you away from the heart of God. For some of us, listen, I'm not here to throw shame bombs at you or anything, but the reality is for many of us, we are reeling and streaming our lives away. It's not because God doesn't love us, he's not working in our lives. It's because we become preoccupied with all kinds of things. And what it's done is it's actually numbed our souls. It's numbed us away from the things that are most important. When it comes to knowing God and making him known, because we become preoccupied with other things, it's actually caused us to be misaligned.